The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council was the largest structure ever built by living hands. It floated in the darkness of space above the neutral world of Ketha Prime, a massive ring of metal and glass that could hold millions. Today, it held representatives from over 400 species. It's all gathered for the annual Galactic Assembly. Han Taesu walked through the entrance with his back straight and his face calm. He was 58 years old, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too much. Behind him walked Yuna, his military attach. She was 34, with sharp eyes that never stopped moving, watching every shadow and every doorway. They were the only humans in the chamber. The aliens around them came in every shape and size. Some were tall and thin, like walking sticks. Others were short and round, like living rocks. There were creatures with too many eyes, creatures with no eyes at all, creatures that floated through the air like living clouds. All of them turned to look at the two humans as they walked past. Han Taesu ignored the stares. He had grown used to them over his 20 years as a diplomat. Humans were still new to the galactic community. They had only made first contact 30 years ago, and many species still viewed them as primitive newcomers who barely deserved a seat at the table. Today, that would change. Today, humanity would formally request membership in the Galactic Defense Pact. If approved, humans would finally be recognized as equals among the stars. Han, Taesu, and Srina took their seats in the human delegation area. It was a small section near the back of the chamber, far from the important species near the front. Han Taesu did not mind. He had learned long ago that position mattered less than patience. The High Speaker called the assembly to order. His name was Gaul, and he was ancient, even by alien standards. His species resembled giant turtles, slow-moving and wise, with shells that had turned white with age. His voice was deep and carried across the entire chamber without any need for technology. The Galactic Council recognizes the petition of the Human Coalition, High Speaker Gaul announced. They seek full membership in the Galactic Defense Pact. The floor is open for discussion. Han Taesu prepared to rise and deliver his speech. He had practiced it for weeks, choosing every word with care. But before he could stand, another voice cut through the chamber like a blade. I object to this waste of time. The speaker was Councillor Viaran, elder of the Thorax species. He was tall and thin, with a body like an insect and eyes like black glass. His species was one of the oldest in the galaxy, and they never let anyone forget it. They looked down on younger races the way a mountain looks down on the grass below. Councillorv. Aaron stood at his podium, his long arms folded across his chest. Why are we even considering this petition? The humans are not worthy of membership in the Defense Pact. They are barely worthy of membership in this council at all. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Han Taesu remained seated, his expression unchanged. Beside him, Yuna's jaw tightened. I have obtained intelligence reports, Councillor Viren continued. He waved one of his long hands, and holographic documents appeared in the air above him. These reports detail the Rim Sector incident from 3 cycles ago. A small group of pirate vessels attacked a human convoy. And what did the mighty humans do? He paused, letting the silence build. They ran away. Laughter erupted from several sections of the chamber. Han Taesu heard the clicking sounds of the Torak delegates and the whistling of the mock species. Even some of the more neutral species were making sounds of amusement. The humans retreated from a minor threat, Councillor Viren said, his voice dripping with scorn. They did not fight. They did not stand their ground. They fled like prey animals running from a predator. He turned to face the human delegation directly, because that is what humans are. Prey. Their bodies are weak. Their lives are short. They evolved on a soft world, eating soft food, living soft lives. They have no natural weapons. No claws, no fangs, no armor. He stepped down from his podium and walked toward the center of the chamber, where everyone could see him clearly. The Galactic Defense Pact requires courage. It requires strength. It requires the willingness to stand and fight against any threat. Councillor Viren spread his arms wide. The humans have none of these qualities. They are genetic cowards. Their very biology makes them unfit for battle. To allow them into the Defense Pact would be an insult to every species that has bled and died protecting this galaxy. The laughter had stopped now, replaced by murmurs of agreement. Hantesu could see delegates nodding their heads or making gestures of approval. The mood of the chamber was shifting against humanity. Ambassador Nyx, representative of the bird-like Polaris species, sat quietly in her section. Her feathers were smooth and flat, but her eyes were fixed on the human diplomat. She alone seemed to notice that something had changed in his expression. Yuna's hand moved slowly toward her hip, where a small weapon was hidden beneath her formal jacket. Hantesu noticed the movement without looking. He reached over and placed his hand gently on her arm. "Not yet," he said quietly. High Speaker Gall raised one massive hand for silence. The chamber slowly grew quiet again. The ancient being turned his great head toward the human delegation, his eyes reflecting thousands of years of wisdom. "The human delegation has heard the objections of Counselor Vieren," High Speaker Gall said. "Do you wish to respond to these claims?" Hantesu sat still for a long moment. The entire chamber watched him, waiting to see what the weak little human would do. Many expected him to apologize, to offer excuses, to beg for another chance to prove humanity's worth. They did not know Hante-Su. They did not know humans. Slowly, with the calm of a man who had seen the worst the universe could offer, Hantesu rose from his seat. His eyes never left Counselor Vieren, and somewhere deep behind those eyes, something cold and ancient began to wake. "Yes," he said, "I believe I do." Hantesu walked toward the center of the chamber. His footsteps made small sounds against the floor, but in the complete silence of the room, they seemed very loud. Every alien in the hall watched him move, curious to see what this small creature would do. Counselor Vieren stood waiting with amusement on his insect-like face. He expected the human to apologize. He expected weakness. He had seen many young species come before the council, and they always bowed their heads when faced with the power of the older races. Tesu stopped a few meters away from the tall Torak. He looked up at the alien, and his expression was completely calm. When he spoke, his voice was low and controlled. "Counselor Vieren, I would like to ask you a simple question before I respond to your accusations." Vieren made a clicking sound of amusement. "Ask your question, little human. In your 12,000 years of recorded history, how many wars has the Torak species fought?" The question seemed to confuse Vieren. His antennae moved in circles as he thought about it. "What does this have to do with anything?" "Please answer." Vieren straightened his body with pride. "The Torak have fought 3 great wars in our history. 3 times we faced enemies who threatened our survival, and 3 times we destroyed them completely. We are a proud warrior race." 3 wars, Hantesu repeated. "In 12,000 years. That is very impressive, Counselor. Yes, it is." Hantesu nodded slowly. Then his expression changed. A smile appeared on his face, but it was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who knew a terrible secret, and then he laughed. The sound was strange and cold. It was not the laugh of a man who had heard something funny. It was the laugh of a man who had heard something so innocent, so unaware that he could not help himself. The chamber went completely silent. Vron's amusement disappeared. His antennae pressed flat against his head. "You find something amusing, human?" Hantesu stopped laughing. When he looked up at Vieren again, his eyes had changed. The calm was still there, but beneath it was something darker. Something that made the massive, insect-like alien want to take a step backward. "Counselor Vieren, humanity has only existed for about 10,000 years of recorded history. We are a younger species than yours." He paused. "Would you like to know how many wars we have fought in that time?" Vieren said nothing. "More than 15,000. The number hung in the air like poison. Hantesu heard sounds of shock from around the chamber. Even High Speaker Gall moved in his seat, his ancient eyes suddenly very focused on the human. 15,000 documented wars, Hantesu continued. His voice began to rise. Wars between nations. Wars between religions. Wars between brothers. Wars fought over land. Wars fought over water. Wars fought over pride, over honor, over insults, over absolutely nothing at all. He took a step toward Viarn. You fought 3 wars in 12,000 years. We fought 3 wars in a single generation. Sometimes we fought 3 wars at the same time on different parts of our world. Viarn tried to speak, but Hantesu did not let him. You call humans cowards. You say we fear battle. You say we are weak prey animals with soft bodies and short lives. His hands closed into fists at his sides. You understand nothing. You know nothing about what we are. He began to remove his formal coat. The movement was slow and deliberate. Around the chamber, aliens watched with confusion as he pulled off the elegant jacket and let it fall to the floor. Beneath the coat, Hantesu wore a simple shirt with short sleeves. And on his AR? From his wrists to his shoulders, were scars. Dozens of them. Some were thin white lines. Others were thick and twisted like ropes. They covered his skin like a map of pain. Do you see these? Hantesu held up his arms, turning slowly so everyone in the chamber could see. These are not wounds from fighting aliens. These are not battle scars from protecting humanity against outside enemies. His voice dropped to something cold and quiet. These are wounds from other humans. From the solar wars, when my own species tried to tear itself apart. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. We were fighting over a dead red planet called Mars, Hantesu continued. Not because we needed it. Not because our survival depended on it. But because humans cannot stop fighting, because violence is woven into our blood like a sickness that never heals. He lowered his arms and turned to face Viarn directly. Humans do not fear battle, counselor. We have never feared battle. What we fear is ourselves. His voice rose, filling the chamber with cold fury. We fear what we become when someone pushes us too far. We fear that ancient voice in the back of our minds that screams for blood and death and victory at any cost. We fear the monster that lives inside every single human being. He stepped closer too. Viarn, the tall Torak, took a step backward without meaning. Every human carries the memories of what our ancestors did to each other. Every human child learns about the horrors we created with our own hands. We do not hide from our violent nature. We live with it. We control it. We cage it inside ourselves every single day of our lives. Hantesu was close to Viarn now. Close enough that he had to look up to see the alien's face. But somehow, in that moment, it did not feel like the human was the smaller one. You want to know if humans fear battle? His voice was barely louder than a whisper, but every microphone in the chamber picked up his words. You want to see what happens when we stop being afraid of ourselves? He looked directly into Vron's black mirror eyes. I can show you. Would you like that, counselor? Would you like to see what humans really are? Hantesu did not wait for anyone to give him permission. He walked to the central platform of the Great Hall, the place where only the most important speakers were allowed to stand. Some aliens made sounds of protest, but nobody tried to stop him. There was something in the way he moved that made even the largest creatures hesitate. He placed his hand on the control panel, and the massive display system above the chamber came to life. Blue light filled the room, casting strange shadows across hundreds of alien faces. You say humans are weak prey animals, Hantesu said. His voice was steady now, controlled, but there was ice beneath every word. You say we have no natural weapons. You are correct. We do not have claws, or fangs, or armor. He paused. So we made our own. And we made them so well that we nearly destroyed ourselves 100 times over. The first image appeared in the air above him. It showed an ancient battlefield, painted by human hands thousands of years ago. Bodies lay scattered across the ground like fallen leaves. Men with swords and spears stood over the dead, their faces twisted with rage. This is from our earliest history, Hantesu said. Before we had machines, before we had science, when our only weapons were stone and metal, even then, we killed each other by the thousands. Not because we had to, but because we could. The image changed. Now, it showed great walls of stone with flames rising behind them. Tiny figures climbed ladders, while defenders threw fire down upon them. Cities burned while armies marched through the ashes. We built civilizations that reached across our world. and then we burned them down. We created empires that lasted for centuries, and then we destroyed them in single nights of blood and fire. Hantasu looked out at the alien faces watching him. Some leaned forward with interest. Others had already started to look uncomfortable. He continued, "We invented new ways to kill each other with every generation. Better swords, stronger armor, machines that could throw death across great distances." The images kept changing, showing war after war after war. We never stopped. We never rested. Even in times of peace, we prepared for the next conflict. Then the images became something different, something worse. "This is what we call the First World War," Hantasu said. The display now showed endless fields of mud filled with trenches that stretched to the horizon. Bodies hung on wire fences like broken toys. Explosions turned the earth into fire. 17 million dead. For years of fighting over a few kilometers of ground that meant nothing. Entire generations of young men destroyed. Several alien delegates made sounds of distress. Ambassador Nyx, the bird-like representative of the Pelori species, had pressed her feathers flat against her body. It was a fear response that her species could not control. "We thought that war was so terrible that we would never do it again," Hantasu said. "We were wrong." The image changed to show cities in flames. Buildings collapsed into rubble. Bombs fell from the sky like rain. Second World War, 70 million dead in 6 years. We invented weapons that could destroy entire cities in a single flash of light. The display showed a mushroom cloud rising into the sky, beautiful and horrible at the same time. We split the atom itself and turned matter into pure destruction. We dropped 2 of these weapons on cities filled with innocent people. Hundreds of thousands died in seconds. The chamber had gone completely silent. Hantasu could hear his own heartbeat in the quiet. After that, we built enough weapons to end all life on our planet. Not just human life. Every plant, every animal, every fish in the sea. We pointed these weapons at each other and lived for decades with our fingers on the trigger. He paused to let the weight of his words sink in. One mistake. One moment of fear or anger, and our entire world would have become a dead rock floating in space. He looked directly at Counselor Vieron as he spoke the next words. And then we went to the stars, and we brought our violence with us. The images changed again. Now they showed human warships firing beams of light at each other in the darkness of space. Cities on the surface of Mars exploded into flame. Great stations broke apart and fell like burning stars. The Solar Wars. Humanity's first war among the stars. We fought over who would control the resources of our own solar system. 3 billion dead. 3 billion of our own people. Colonies wiped out. Stations destroyed. Our own homeworld burned. The final image appeared. It was Earth, seen from space. But it was not the beautiful blue and green world that humans loved. Great black scars crossed the continents where cities had once stood. Clouds of ash and smoke covered half the planet. "This is what we did to our home," Hantasu said quietly. "The only world we had. The planet that gave us life. We burned it because we could not stop fighting each other." He turned off the display. The chamber fell into darkness for a moment before the normal lights returned. "The Rim Sector incident that Counselor Vieron mentioned," Hantasu said. "The one where human ships retreated from pirates. He called it cowardice." He shook his head slowly. "We did not retreat because we were afraid of the pirates. We retreated because we were afraid of what we would do to them if we stayed." He turned to face the full assembly. "Our captain knew that if he gave the order to fight, his crew would not just defeat those pirates. They would hunt down every pirate base in the sector. They would destroy every ship. They would kill every person. They would burn everything until nothing was left." Hantasu's voice was very quiet now. "We ran away to save their lives, Counselor. Not our own." The Great Hall remained silent after Hantasu finished speaking. The images of human warfare had left a heavy weight in the air. Many alien delegates had stopped moving entirely, frozen in what their biology recognized as the presence of a dangerous predator. Counselor. Vieron had returned to his seat during the presentation. His long body was stiff and his black eyes were very still. But he was a Torak elder, and 12,000 years of pride would not let him accept defeat so icily. He stood up again. "Words and pictures," Viren said. His voice was not as strong as before, but he forced himself to sound confident. "Old history and ancient stories. You show us images from your primitive past and expect us to be impressed." He straightened his body, trying to look tall and powerful. "The Torak have faced real enemies. We have fought species with technology far beyond your simple weapons. These wars you speak of were fought against yourselves. Against creatures just as weak and primitive as you." Hantesu watched the Torak counselor with an expression that showed nothing. Inside, he felt something like sadness. He had hoped that the history lesson would be enough. He had hoped that Viren would understand, but some lessons needed to be taught in different ways. "You want proof?" Hantesu said. It was not a question. "I want proof that humans are anything more than violent animals who learn to build ships," Viren replied. "Show me that your military is real. Show me that you are more than stories and old pictures." Hantesu nodded slowly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. It was simple, just a flat piece of metal with one button on it. "Admiral Sung-ho," he said into the device. "Can you hear me?" A hologram appeared next to Hantesu. It showed a man in his 60s with a face like carved stone and eyes that had seen the Eve of worlds. He wore a simple, gray uniform with no decorations or medals. He did not need them. Anyone who knew anything about human military history knew the name Sung-ho. "I hear you, Diplomat Han," the Admiral said. His voice was calm and flat. The voice of a man who had sent thousands of soldiers to their deaths and slept peacefully afterward. "The Torak delegation wants to see proof of human military capability," Hantesu said. "I request permission to give them a demonstration." Admiral Sung-ho was quiet for a moment. Then the corner of his mouth moved slightly in what might have been a smile. "Permission granted."
Ice.
He turned his head slightly as if speaking to someone outside the hologram. "Captain Bora, show them the Bison's Fury." The view screens around the Great Hall activated automatically, showing the space above Ketha Prime. The stars shone brightly against the black emptiness. Various alien ships floated in their assigned positions, including the Great Torak's flagship at the center of their formation. Nothing seemed to happen, then space itself rippled like water. A ship appeared out of nothing. One moment, there was empty space beside the Torak flagship. The next moment, a human destroyer was there, long and dark and deadly, so close to the Torak vessel that they almost touched. No alarm had sounded. No sensor had detected its approach. No one had known it was there. The chamber exploded into chaos. Aliens shouted in dozens of different languages. The Torak delegates jumped from their seats, their bodies shaking with fear and anger. Some of the smaller species ran for the exits. High Speaker Gall struck his staff against the floor, calling for order. But even his ancient voice could barely be heard over the noise. "Admiral." Sun-Ho's hologram remained perfectly calm in the middle of the chaos. He spoke clearly, and somehow his voice cut through all the other sounds. "The Bison's Fury has been positioned beside the Torak flagship since the beginning of this conference. 3 days. The Admiral paused. "Our weapons have been locked onto Counselor Vren's ship since his delegation arrived. Your sensors never knew we were there. Your advanced Torak technology detected nothing." Hantesu watched Counselor Vren's reaction carefully. The Torak elder had gone very still, his black eyes fixed on the view screen where the human warship sat like a shadow of death beside his own vessel. "We could have destroyed you at any moment," Admiral Sung-Ho continued. "We chose not to. That is the human way. We do not attack first. We do not kill without reason. But we are always watching, always ready, always waiting for the moment when someone makes the mistake of threatening what we love." The hologram faded away. The chamber had grown quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. It was the silence of creatures who had suddenly realized that they were not the most dangerous things in the room. Yuna stepped down from the human delegation area and walked to stand beside Hantesu. She moved differently now. The polite, careful movements of a diplomatic assistant were gone. Now, she moved like a hunting animal, smooth and dangerous. "My name is Yuna," she said. Her voice was soft but clear. "I am not a diplomatic assistant. I am a special operations soldier. I have killed 847 enemies in service to humanity. I volunteered for this mission because our intelligence suggested there would be a threat against Diplomat Han." She looked directly at Counselor Viren. "I have been watching you since we arrived, Counselor. I have studied how you move, how you think, how you react to danger. I have identified 17 different ways to kill you using only objects that are currently in this room." She paused. "This is not a threat. This is simply how humans think. All the time. Every moment." Without even trying, Huntezu walked slowly toward Counselor Viren. The Torak elder tried to stand tall, but his legs trembled. The human stopped close enough that only the nearby microphones could pick up his words. "Do you understand now, Counselor?" Huntezu asked softly. "We are not afraid of you. We have never been afraid of you. We are afraid of ourselves. We are afraid of what we will do if someone forces us to stop being gentle." He leaned closer, and his voice dropped to a whisper. "You should be afraid too." High Speaker Gal rose from his ancient seat. The movement was slow, as all movements were slow for his species, but it commanded instant attention. The chaos in the chamber faded as every delegate turned to watch the oldest being in the room. "Enough," he said. His deep voice rolled through the hall like distant thunder. "There has been enough for today." He turned his great head toward the Torak delegation. Counselor Vian had returned to his seat, and he looked smaller somehow, as if the weight of everything he had seen had pressed him down into his chair. "Counselor Vian," High Speaker Gal said, "you came before this council with accusations against the human species. You called them cowards. You said they were unfit to join our alliance. You presented information that you claimed proved their weakness." The ancient being paused. "That information has been shown to be wrong. At best, it was incomplete. At worst, it was a deliberate lie." Viren opened his mouth to speak, but Gal raised one massive hand. "The Torak delegation is formally punished for attempting to damage these proceedings. You will not be allowed to vote on the matter before us. You will remain silent until this assembly is finished." Vron's mouth closed. His antennae pressed flat against his head in shame. High Speaker Gal turned to face the full assembly. "The request of the Human Coalition for membership in the Galactic Defense Pact will now be decided. All delegates will vote." The voting took only moments. Glowing symbols appeared above each delegation's area, showing their choice. Green for yes. Red for no. The chamber filled with green light. Every single delegation voted in favor of humanity's membership. Even species that had laughed at Vron's mockery now supported the human request. Even species that had shown fear at the images of human warfare chose to stand with Earth. No one voted against. No one refused to vote. For the first time in the history of the Galactic Council, a request was approved by everyone. High Speaker Gal nodded his great head slowly. "The Human Coalition is hereby granted full membership in the Galactic Defense Pact. Welcome to the Alliance."
Us.
The assembly ended soon after. Delegates filed out of the Great Hall in small groups, talking quietly among themselves. Many looked at the human delegation as they passed. Some looked afraid. Others looked curious. A few nodded their heads with respect. Hantesu stood near the exit, accepting congratulations from various ambassadors. His formal coat was back on, hiding the scars that he had shown to the assembly. His face was calm again, the cold rage locked away behind years of careful control. A soft voice spoke from beside him. "Diplomat Han. May I speak with you privately?" He turned to find Ambassador Nix standing there. The Polari's feathers had returned to their normal smooth pattern, but her eyes held something different than before. Where there had been polite interest, there was now true respect. "Of course, Ambassador," Han Tezu said. Nix led him to a quiet corner of the hall, away from the other delegates. Yuna took a position nearby where she could watch them both, her eyes never stopping their constant movement. "I must tell you something," Nix said. Her voice was musical, as all Polari voices were, but there was weight behind her words. My species has been watching humanity since you first reached the stars. We believed that you were dangerous primitives. We thought that your love of violence made you unfit for the galactic community. Lantasu said nothing. He simply listened. Today I learned that we were right about one thing and wrong about another. Nyx tilted her head, a gesture of deep thought among her kind. You are dangerous. Perhaps the most dangerous species any of us have ever met. But you are not primitive. Your violence does not make you unfit. She paused. It makes you understand something that the rest of us have forgotten. What is that? Han Tasu asked. The true cost of war. Feathers moved slightly. Most species in this galaxy fight when they must and forget when it is done. We heal, we move forward. We put the violence behind us and pretend it never happened. She looked directly into Han Tezu's eyes. But humans remember. You carry the weight of every war you have ever fought. You teach your children about the horrors of the past. You never let yourselves forget what you are capable of. Han Tasu was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. I cannot forget, he said. If we forgot, we would do it all again. The memory of what we have done is the only thing that keeps us from doing it forever. Nyx nodded slowly. That is why you joined the galactic community, is it not? Not for conquest. Not for power. But because you hoped that among the stars, you might finally find peace. Hantesu did not answer with words, but something in his eyes told her that she was right. Later that night, Hantesu stood alone in his quarters aboard the human ship. The room was simple, with a small bed and a desk and a large window that looked out at the stars. He had changed out of his formal clothes and wore only simple gray pants and a shirt. Yuna entered without knocking. She had changed as well, back into the practical uniform of a soldier rather than the disguise of a diplomatic helper. The Bizon's fury has returned to hiding, she reported. The Tauric delegation has left the system. Ambassador Nyx has asked for an official meeting with our government to discuss closer friendship between the Pelari and humanity.